Oh, we're live. Okay. Um, it's not how I wanted to start the video, being surprised that we're live, but hey, whatever. I got a story. It's pretty interesting, and it's kind of old, sorta. Anyways, imagine you're 15 years old and you find yourself on an island in the South Pacific, to be specific, and you find yourself on a beach. You wake up to the ocean in a hut with the palm fronds as a ceiling, and slept on the floor. It's hard to tell this story without injecting uh, that this is a true story and I went through it, and I'm trying to tell it in a different way. So we'll scrap that because that's too difficult. So, anyways, I found myself at 15 years old on a beach in Western Samoa. I didn't find myself there. I got there. I know how I got there, but there's other kids there. There's other teenagers. There's hundreds of kids on the beach, all between probably 13 and 18, and um, that was my life basically for 3 years. And this is going to be the story of it, or at least part of it. Um, Western Samoa was part of a program, and I guess that's the best way to put it, a company called Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs is what it was called. WASP to whatever that is, make it short. Um, it was part of a bunch of seminars. They had a bunch of seminars um, involved with it that were designed to, well, a lot of people have different opinions on what they may have been designed to do. And a lot of people got a lot of different results with those seminars, I'm sure. I know what I got out of it. I know what some other people got out of it. It can be interesting. But again, so here's this beach. We're on a tropical island. It sounds real nice, a bunch of a bunch of teenagers doing what they want on a beach, but that was far from the truth, or far from reality. It was a very stringent school setting with extreme rules. Like it may have well have been, uh, uh, no, I won't say jail or anything like that, but we could not leave. We were not permitted to leave our designated beach. We could not go anywhere. We couldn't write letters home, or yeah, we could write letters home, but only once a week. And we could not call home at all. If something happened, we were, I forget how many thousands of miles away from the United States, but um, when I first got there, you could not call home. So I was 15 years old in a foreign land, very far from home, and could not reach home. ET could not phone home. So, um, and it took a little while to, the way this place was set up, and the way I'll put it, was to earn that privilege to call home. So that's pretty interesting, actually, that I put it that way, because what kind of a 15-year-old deserves to really be in a position where they have to earn the privilege to call home. I never really thought about it that way, but in either case, um, I got down there in September of 1997. The kids nowadays are calling that the late 1900s, so we'll go with that. Um, and when I first got there, it was pretty much culture shock for sure. As I mentioned, uh, the sleeping arrangements were in literally palm frond roof huts. on the floor. When I very first got there, I didn't have like an actual bedding thing, so I think somebody lent me like a mat and a sheet or something, and that's what I slept on for a couple of weeks until I got my all of my worldly possessions, which came in a little 18-gallon Rubbermaid tub, and there would remain all of my possessions for the next almost 3 years, close to 3 years. To be specific, 2.5 in Western Samoa and about 6 months in Ensenada, Mexico. So there I was on a beach, enjoying sunshine, following rules, eating what was fed to us, um, following the again rules and procedures of the place. Now, I would use the term facility, but that paints the wrong picture in the sense that literally we were on a beach with huts. So that doesn't fit the description or the narrative or the thought maybe of what you might think of as like a facility. There were bathrooms, but they were separate, almost like an outhouse to a certain extent. And then showers. There was no hot water. It was always cold water when I first got there. Um, and there's a lot of experience, a lot of things that took place. So I kind of wanted to share those things on this live stream, and hoping that some of my fellow friends from back in those days that spent some time down there might watch some of this and maybe get a little bit of a different perspective as to what what really kind of was very hard for some people. So like I said, cat, get out of here. It was relatively uncomfortable would be the best word that I could use. And I'm quite certain that was on purpose, of course. So there we were, what we did all day to paint a picture of kind of this daily routine. We would pick up, all the leaves and stuff that would fall on the ground, and every morning we'd go pick up all the leaves and throw them in the burn pit and go eat breakfast, which usually consisted of milk and rice in a cup. That was our breakfast most of the time. Every once in a while, they'd put a little bit of sugar and maybe a tea leaf in the mix, so it had a little bit of extra flavor besides milk and rice. So after that, we went on to a schedule. We'd either go to school, or which school was kind of tongue in cheek. You'd get the textbook, you'd read it, you'd take a test, you'd have to pass it to a certain percentage, and then you would move on to the next test for that whole textbook, and that would basically be the equivalent of a year's credit. So needless to say, I did finish school very soon. I really knocked it out. I think it was about 1.5 or 2 years before I should have graduated that I was totally done with all of my credits. So that was kind of cool, I guess, but my schooling was pretty short after that, or pretty short with that considered. And so I had a lot of time on my hands when I was in school from that point. And actually, that was where my learning began, to be 100% honest, because then I was able to read the books and the textbooks that I was interested in. I could pick science and learn about the things that I was curious about. And I think that's actually when I started retaining information. Anyways, back to Samoa. Lunch would usually consist of some sort of sandwich, tuna or peanut butter and marmalade. They made sure it wasn't a good jam. You're a very bitter jam. I think that was on purpose too. Um, so here I am, Western Samoa, on the beach. Days go by, weeks go by, months go by, year goes by. I think it was 13 or 14 months before I was able to phone home. Um, so what I really wanted to try to do here actually is paint more of an interesting picture, an interesting story. Um, and I think that's probably why I was trying to start it with more of just a story that didn't include myself, and then get into including myself. Um, if you can't imagine, it's a very different um, school that I experienced. That is probably where I should have started this. It was a very different school experience. One that was very structured, of course, which was very needed. I was pretty rebellious as a kid, and that's actually the reason I found myself there. So I have to take responsibility for my actions. I wasn't super bad, but I was 15 going on 25, and didn't want to listen to what anything that anybody had to say. So um, I was an extremely rebellious soul at young age. Many reasons for that. Um, but it it was what it was, and I did learn a lot from it, and that's really where I'm trying to get to. Um, I've found in life the the most valuable lessons that I have learned came from the hardest situations. That's a little bit bittersweet, um, because of course the lessons and the values that I have taken from things have been extremely valuable for me in my life. Sorry, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I really wouldn't. Um, Gotta fix that now. So again, I wouldn't change it for anything. Samoa in particular was one of the rougher ones. I didn't think this was going to be this difficult, to be honest with you. Now I'm thinking this is a stupid idea, Nick. But uh, the stories that I can tell you about that place are somewhat crazy. Shit. I'm really thinking this is a stupid idea. But, anyways, um, I wish I could see the comments on here, and I don't know why I can't. I'm going to try to see that, but I wish somebody would comment something. So give me something to talk about. Oh, there they are. What the heck? All right. Hello, everybody. Okay. Here we go. Comments. Good stuff. I can see some of them. Oh no, now they went away. Anyways, I saw one. Um, John, I would, like I said, I was a rebellious teen, man. I was running with the wrong people, and I mean, typical stuff. But it was early '90s, and the typical stuff for early '90s was a lot different than the typical stuff for my parents, and just like our typical stuff in the 80s and 90s is way different than now's typical stuff. Um, and so I think the difference maybe was that I was so hard headed and like I was gonna do what I wanted to do, and it didn't matter. Nothing, no argument that somebody else could make to me for why I shouldn't smoke cigarettes or go out and drink with the buddies. No argument that anybody could make, was of any consequence to me. So, um, dang, where are the comments? Um, so, anyways, it just, my parents were tired of it, so they sent me there. That's the bottom line. That was pretty interesting. I could tell that story. You know, I'll save that one. I'm not going to go into that one actually. Change the names of the innocent and to protect the innocent. Anyways, I do want to paint more of a picture of the beaches and um because actually like now if I could go back and do it under what I know now, it would be kind of cool. Like if I understood and knew and that it was going to play out and how it was and all that kind of stuff, it would be cool because I would know the premise. It wouldn't be such a jarring like, hey, you went from a regular high school life to this, and it was 2.5 years of this. So, um, where was I going with that? Yeah, my wife's helping me see comments. Thank you, love. um, Cody's on there, man. I hope you're still there, dude. So yeah, I'm seeing comments now. So there's a few. I only see three. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Comments. Two people. One like. um, I don't want to make this so super long, and I'm kind of regretting even doing this. But um, dinner. Oh, I know what I want to go into. Okay, this is the most interesting thing, and this isn't really. This is going to be a lot easier. In 1998, 48 hours came down to Samoa to film and investigate this facility. So again, this is in 1998. I'm pretty sure it was in the end of 1998 because I left Samoa in early 1999 and it was a few months before I left. So in 1998, 48 hours came down to film the beaches. These beaches consisted of 3 beaches. Um, when I make this a video, maybe I'll edit it and make it a lot more presentable and put a satellite video of a picture of these beaches. But it's 3 beaches kind of in a row along the coast of Samoa, Western Samoa, and they were granted 48 hours was granted permission to film 2 beaches one day and 1 beach the next. And that's important for what I'm about to say because the first day when they filmed the 2 beaches, they moved all the level 1 people to the 3rd beach, so that those kids that didn't have anything to lose, that would have been like, hey, this place is messed up, man, and really tried to say something, would not be there, so that everybody on the beaches with the film crew would have at least had something to lose for doing something like that, which kept us in check, by the way. We were also, what's interesting, promised. Okay, back up a little bit to like the day before the cameras came. We started getting some pretty good food. We started getting like hot dogs with ketchup, which we never got. We usually got burnt chicken or burnt lamb chop. Lamb chops are pretty good actually. Um, but yeah, we usually got what really would be like not very good food. Burnt rice, but like the top of it's undercooked, but it tastes burnt because the bottom was burnt. Um, that was tasty. My first meal was boiled sausage, boiled real sausage, not this sausage you buy at the store. Sausage that's like actually in like pig intestines or whatever, however they used to make it, and twist them up. That was, and it boiled. So a gray sausage was my first meal. Um, and yeah, the food was crap. But a day before 48 hours came, uh, the the food started to get a little bit better. We actually had some like fruit. They threw some canned fruit in our milk. They like I said, gave us some hot dogs with a thing of ketchup to go around like 20 people, one bottle of ketchup. Um, and so we were all happy. We were tickled pink to be eating like decent food, And 48 hours though was down there filming, and we're sitting there. We used to get fed on these trays. They were just like square flat trays. We'd sit on a chair and eat off these trays, and we're sitting there just eating with smiles on our faces like, yeah, this is such good food. But even 48 hours, it was still such crap that even 48 hours was able to like really lay into how crappy the food looked. And like I just think that's kind of funny because we were loving it, man. We were just, oh yeah, this is such good food, and holy moly, this I can't believe we're eating this good, and but anyways, we were promised that food. We were told first, like, hey, you guys have been great, and you deserve it, and the food's going to continue. Don't worry, it's not because of the cameras. No, 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 it's not because of the cameras. It's because you guys are worthy and you guys deserve it. And so of course, the day after the cameras left, no more good food, right back to the normal slop, if you will. So I thought that was kind of funny. But um Samoa, I got there when I was 15 years old and spent 2.5 years down there. And where I kind of want to go with this, and why I was hoping that some of my fellow peers from down there, maybe watching this, is um, because I got a lot out of the experience, and that may be putting it a little bit too light, but I got a lot out of, or I'll put it to you this way: throughout the time since I left there to now, profoundly, very profoundly, there's been lessons that have presented themselves that have extreme um, parallels to some of the lessons that they were trying to, what felt at the time, shove down our throat in this place. Like it almost seemed like, what are these guys talking about? This has nothing to do with with life once we get out of this miserable place, out of this hellhole. What does that, I'll give you some examples of here in a second, have to do with living real life? Like, how do I apply that to real life besides just in this place? And later, once I left there and I got living into my adult life, especially when I got probably, definitely in my mid 20s, maybe late 20s, a lot of things started to seem kind of applicable. And so I started to remember some of these things that the seminars and the lessons and part of the whole thing was about. And profoundly, I was able to use them in a positive way with my life, and overcome some of the other than struggles that come with everybody's life. And that has been so valuable because, man, when I tell you my life's been a struggle, I'm telling you my life's been a struggle. And I'm not bullshitting. Pardon my French. But I love you, daughter. I see you there. But I think that the only way I've been able to overcome so much of the crap that I've had to deal with is a direct result of the lessons that I've been able to apply. Um, and um, where was I going with that? I'm paying attention to the comments now. Anyways, I was able to use those lessons and apply them to my life. And those lessons, I think, are worth sharing. The biggest one, I think, honestly, is that through the hardest times, people have got to find a way to learn a lesson from those hard times. Because then, or not because then, otherwise, those hard times that you've prevailed through are somewhat wasted in my philosophy, I guess you could say. And why do that? You know, why go through hell just to waste it? You know, there's some profound, heavy lessons, or you know, positive things that can come out of some pretty crappy situations. Um, anyways, I'm getting back into that, and I'm losing myself or losing my place in the story here. But imagine a beach, palm fronds, the paradise. Yet, oh man, I totally lost my place. I do apologize for everyone watching, but somebody comment, tell me what you'd like to hear about Samoa, because that might be a little bit better than me trying to reminisce and just go down, you know, memory lane. But um, maybe I'll share some of those lessons and some of those examples. Maybe that'll be good. I was pondering today, and actually, this is the reason I wanted to make this video, because I was pondering today a few things, but I think probably the biggest one that made me want to make this video was seeing how perspective shapes our attitude and opinions and understanding of things. And so one of the things that I've kind of tried to practice over the last 30 years since I learned some of these things is like I said, implementing. Oh, man, I, I should have turned comments off, maybe. Just kidding. Dang, I feel like I'm flailing. I'm on live here, but 1 second. I'm thirsty. Time out. I'll be right back. This is a stupid idea. This is a stupid idea.
Daddy, are you done?
No.
Daddy,
yes, baby.
why do you have a microphone?
Oh, I don't know where it went. It's right here.
Why do you have it on your... Did you see John McClay? Why do you have it on your head? Is your mic on?
All right, I apologize. I needed to gather my thoughts and hydrate. So All right, I'm going to start with the structure. That might be pretty easy. When we got there, or regardless of when we got, everybody down there had to go through some um, seminar once per month. And those seminars are really where all of this, all of what I refer to as the lessons that I learned, or the things that I was able to um, learn, or something positive that I could gain out of this experience. Um, and those seminars are actually, honestly, quite more interesting to me now in my life than, of course, they were then. I mean, like I said, then it was like, how is this going to apply to anything that I'm doing ever? So those seminars, they were called tasks, TASKS, and I can't remember exactly what that abbreviation meant, but that's what it was called. Excuse me. And it was started by a man named, or that was started by a man named David Gilcrease, I believe was his name. And that stemmed from a different um, form of seminars. If you're interested in that, you can just kind of search that tasks and whatnot, and you'll find the seminars that it came from. And some of those I think are a little controversial. Some of them are pretty cool. When we were in Samoa, we did do a lot of like Tony Robbins, or listen and read to a lot of Tony Robbins and all of his, thoughts. And I don't know how I would put it, but his philosophies and his experiences and all that kind of stuff. So to give you a little bit of an idea of kind of how this was, and so again, back to tasks. That was the name of the seminars, and then the name of the individual seminars. There were 4 seminars in the I don't know what you call it, in the mix, and you had to go through the first one in order to go through the second one, in order to go through the third one, in order to go through the fourth one. And these seminars only came around once a month. They had facilitators that would come down and put on the seminar. And these seminars were, the first 2 were 3 days long. And they were long days. If you've ever been to like business seminars, any other seminars, um, they usually try to keep them nice and good so they keep your attention and all that kind of stuff. These were seminars we didn't have a choice. We could literally, like, it, if we weren't getting something, or the facilitator thought we were just like BSing, we would get kicked out of the seminar, and then we'd have to wait a whole nother month to try to go through that 3-day seminar again. So you had to go through those seminars in order to make progress in the structure of the facility of the program. And so if you wanted to try to get the hell out of there, which is the only way you could get out of there, was to graduate, or finish, go through the whole thing, which only happened sometimes, by the way. But you had to go through these seminars one by one, once a month. And if you didn't make it through the first one that first month, you had to wait the next month to make it through the first one again. And sometimes people would go 6, 8 months before they made it through one, because they just for whatever reason, there's probably a lot of reasons that it could contribute to that. But you kind of either had to start playing ball, or some people, I think, really, like, I don't know. They just kind of got droned out, and they were like, okay, yeah, I got to go through the thing. And it was just kind of like this, almost just just like to deal with it and get through it, So the people that usually didn't make it through the seminars many months, into it, and they still have to go through the first one, usually were like pretty like stubborn, like, I'm going to do what I want. I don't care if I'm in Samoa. I don't care. Shut up. Don't tell me what to do, So again, the seminars came around once a month, for all 4 seminars. So you had the first one, which was called Discovery. You had the second one, which was called focus. You had the third one, which was called accountability. And you had the fourth one, which was called keys to success, is what these were called. I want to talk about accountability really quick, because that was actually probably the most, or the first thing that I started to realize had a big effect on my life in a positive way. And when I say accountability, I want to be very specific with what I'm saying when I say accountability. I don't mean like fault. Like if you get in a car accident, for example, and you get smashed by a car, that's not your fault. Go away, kitty. So that's not your fault. But you can be accountable for certain things that 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 are fact. Like you were in that spot at that time when the car hit you. You know what I'm saying? And so that's being accountable for yourself and where you are and what you're doing. And that's very important for what I'm about to say next, because if you're totally accountable for everything that you do, or this is what I've learned. I'm not trying to preach, but I've learned that if I'm accountable for every single thing I do, and I pay attention to the results or the consequences, then I start to formulate a way that I can actually create the results that I intend, instead of feeling like the world is happening to me. Because and that's exactly why I want to make this video, is because I think so many times we all are guilty of it. We think that the world happens to us. We think that whatever, and to a certain extent, when you get, spiritual and stuff like that, there may be some truth to that. I don't want to get in that tangent, but I think we all think that everything is just happens to us. However, once I took myself and put myself in it and looked at myself from an accountable standpoint, and tried to account for all of my actions, and all of my actions that may have led up to a certain event or a certain result, then I was able to see what created what result. Just like baking. When you bake a cake, if you put too much something in there, you have a different result. If you put too little something, you have a different result. So to me, that it became in my mind a recipe, so to speak. And so that's why I mentioned the accountability, because it was, some people took it as like you had to look at accountability as like something's your fault, like you have to take accountability that, whatever. But the way that it was formulated, or the end result of the way it was formulated was more, the end result had to be kind of where I, led it, of following your actions to know why you got a certain result. And the importance of that is because if you know your actions that cause certain results, then you can change the actions and change the results. Or to put it in a different way, to change the results, you can change the actions. So that to me was the first like huge epiphany when I was probably in my mid-20s. And keep in mind, this is now 8 to 10 years probably after I was out of Samoa, and it started to dawn on me some of these things that were just so profound. At the time I was dealing with a lot of things in my life at the time, and was trying to figure that out, and trying to make something better. Nobody likes living a hard life. Nobody likes hardships. That's never fun. But I personally have gained the perspective of appreciating the hardships. Not that I wish them upon myself or wish them upon anybody, or not that I encourage somebody to wish them upon themselves, but I do appreciate and am really actually grateful for all of the struggles and and trials and tribulations that I've ever dealt with, because I've internalized the learning from them. Learn from it. If it's something I did, something somebody else did, doesn't matter. If I learn from it, then any negative experience is not in vain. And I think that's kind of a valuable thing to share with humanity today, honestly. Um, but it all started with that accountability. So let's go back to the seminars. There's 4 seminars, and the first one was, like I mentioned, discovery, and it was intended to kind of like try to make you think of or to discover kind of like who you are, who you want to be, what you want to portray, because that's important. If you're paying attention to all the things that you're doing and trying to make the results that you want, it's important to understand and be seated in the results or to know what the results that you intend, and to be honest with what and why you want them. So anyway, so the first one was discovery, and that was intended for you to discover what who you were, basically, and what you wanted to be all about. And keep in mind, I'm a teenager at this point, and so it's kind of the beginning of our adult life, if you will. So there was the focus and the effort on kind of like the beginning, is like, what do you want to be, and honestly, there was the parents of all the kids that were down there. Some of them went through a similar format of this particular seminar, but it was like way watered down, not as intense, not as crazy serious and whatnot. But yeah, so then focus was kind of to just focus on that and learn how to, whatever, try to build what you wanted to build. But I want to now, since there's a little bit going on here, there's been a lot of documentaries of these schools, okay? And they were all over the world, actually. There was one in Samoa, the one that I went to. I know there was one in Jamaica. Okay, yeah. So there was one in Jamaica. There was one in southern Utah. There was one in the Czech Republic once upon a time. There was one in Montana. There was one in Mexico. And I think there was a few other places that did end up, having new facilities done, because they ended up getting a lot of flack, honestly. And I don't want to make the argument one way or the other, whether they deserve the flack or not. I will say, cat, shush. I will say, though, that most of the major issues with what went on at least in Samoa, I went in Samoa, a lot of the major issues that went on were definitely the responsibility, or not responsibility, were done by workers of the place. So in other words, it wasn't like it was a policy, right? There weren't policies that encouraged anything that wasn't, taking care of us to a certain extent. I mean, to the point, like, same thing with jail. I mean, if somebody goes to jail, I mean, they have to take care of you. Jail's a lot more dangerous, I would think, even though Samoa was kind of dangerous too. But I'll paint this picture. This is probably the best thing to visualize this. If you've ever seen World War II movie, and and I don't mean to compare it to this because that's it, but just the movie of a concentration camp and the style of that, and a Vietnam like concentration camp. Okay, and the movies. That's all I have to go off of. Okay, so if you took those two things, the structure kind of like the World War II things and the look of the Vietnam ones with the huts and the palm fronds and all that kind of stuff. If you took those two and morphed them and took away one thing, and that was we weren't, or two things, we weren't prisoners of war. We couldn't go anywhere. We were obviously contained to our beach. Um, but yeah, if you took away that we weren't POWs, of course, and we didn't necessarily fear being killed by the facility. Okay. So that's a big difference. So hopefully I don't catch flack for comparing it to any of those two things, because those two things obviously were way worse, I'm sure, because you feared death from your captors and you were a prisoner of war. That would suck. I can't imagine. But that kind of paints the picture of kind of what this place looked like and resembled. So where was I going with that? I totally forgot. But so yeah, we didn't fear death from our captors, but it was pretty dangerous. I mean, actually more dangerous than for sure the people who were, well, I don't know. I'll put it to you this way. One of my first few nights there, a centipede, I don't know, probably that long, and I don't know if you can see that. It's probably, I'm showing about 8 inches or so. Rainbow colored scorpion. Okay, rainbow color scorpion, which are like not good. They're like the most poisonous down there, from what I recall. Fell from the roof, from the ceiling, onto my bed, and all I could do was kind of just like throw it off with the sheet and hope it didn't land on something else. But there was a guy down there too, one of the staff people, who actually used to catch the centipedes. If you ever need to catch a centipede, this is how you do it. You take a cord and you tie it in a knot and you leave a big loop open and you make whatever it goes through there. You probably catch a snake this way too. Whenever it goes through the loop, you pull the knot and you catch it. So that's how he'd catch the centipede. And then he'd cut the pinchers off, and he'd let it run around his shoulders and on his head. And if he's still alive and he watches this, I hope he makes a comment. That guy's name was Martini. In Samoa, that was Martin. So Martini, if you see this, man, say, hey, you're a crazy dude. But he was a staff down there, and some of those guys were pretty cool, actually. They were workers, down there. Some of them were not as cool. There were some of them that weren't too nice. But some of them, knew and appreciated our situation and tried to help make the best of it for what we could. So some of them were really cool. And yeah, I mean, there's just so much. It's like, it's just 2.5 years of some pretty, I smile about it now. So, okay. Somebody asked if it still exists today. No, it doesn't exist today. It got closed down, and actually it's a good thing, probably a blessing, not because of or not necessarily because of like how it was, but for sure because of the fact that in 2011, a tsunami hit those beaches, those exact beaches, and wiped everything out. So had that still been in existence, everybody on those beaches, man, that would have been, man, oh man, oh man, oh man. That I couldn't. And thinking about it like that, in all reality, that could have happened when I was down there for all intents and purposes. And that's something to think about, man. Holy mackerel. But yeah, it does not exist today. Now it's a nice resort. As a matter of fact, in fact, there was a guy who was down there. I invited him to watch this. Oh, now I figured it out. Okay, now I figured it out. But I'll read through those in a second. When I got a hold of this guy because he was just recently down there on one of the beaches, or not on one of the beaches, in Western Samoa, and was able to go down and check out this resort. It's some really nice resort now that's on those beaches. So apparently the company that was leasing those beaches didn't leave in very good terms with the village that this was in. So there's some pretty from what I understand, I haven't been back. I'd love to go back actually, but no, they don't exist anymore. So um where I was started to go with this, it was a very tough experience, a very, very tough experience. And again, I'm not going to make the argument whether for or against the place, because one thing I do know is that for me, the and I don't want to say like the atrocities committed, or but the things that were definitely not okay happened. Were individual staff. They weren't policy of the place. So to me, that doesn't remove any responsibility from the place, and it's does put blame on the individual. But I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm not going to make an argument for or against anything. But you know, one of my first, well, one night down there, I think it was maybe a month or two into being down there. One of the staff members, and I'll name names here. I mean, it's in Samoa. I hope some Samoans watch this and whatnot. Hopefully, it reaches down there because I hope there's some people that were staff down there that are still around, the cool ones. But if this guy's down there, I don't care about mentioning names. I think he got beat pretty good anyways after this incident by the other staff, to be quite honest. But what ended up happening was there's a guy, a good friend of mine actually, and I wish I was in a better position to help him right now. He's in a little bit of a rough place in his life. He's my age too, but so for that purposes, I'm not going to mention any names. But if you know you know who you are, and if you were there, you know who he is. But anyways, he was pretty rebellious. He was, I think, one of them guys that took a little while to go through the first seminar. But one night after shutdown is what they called it, um, something happened, and one of the staff members, his name was Pene. Don't know what that was supposed to be in Samoan, but his name was Pene. And Pene got very mad at this other student, my friend, and it went back and forth and escalated to the point where Pene kicked his head through the masonite wall of that schoolhouse. And when that happened, we're in a whole little, like, by this time I was able to sleep in a different fale, they called it, and it had a tin roof instead of a palm frond roof, and it was a little bit bigger. It was like a little schoolhouse. And Pene, like I said, kicked that kid's head through that masonite wall. Now, I mean, that's gonna hurt, and he's a kid, so he definitely doesn't deserve that at all. I mean, it wasn't a block wall. Look at me, go trying to put positive spin on it, but all of us kids, like, there's a whole bunch of us, and quite frankly, it became a brawl between us kids and Pene, because he then proceeded to, after that happened, And we all were like, hey, Penny, what the, you know, and like a lot of us said that. And he looked at this one kid, and I don't remember him. I don't remember his name, but he was redheaded and really small. I was small too, but he was smaller than me. And he goes, he says, "You want some too?" Or Penny said that to this other kid, and stepped over all these other kids and just laid him out. And then he got rushed by all the big kids. And then that was very short-lived until all the staff came into the schoolhouse through the one entrance and basically took over the situation. And after that, all we heard was like, I mean, Pane, I know, got some fists, got some rocks, got some sticks, got some ground. I mean, the staff that appreciated our situation took care of Pane for sure, Samoan style. You know, like, so justice was served in that case, as far as I'm concerned. And I heard it all the way up the cliff, because the way to get off that beach was up a little skinny trail to go up the cliff, and then you're upstairs is what we called it. But yeah, Pane got what was coming to him after that by the other Samoan staff. So that's one little story. Oh, another comment. Oh, we want comments. I think I figured out oh, that's my camera. Talk about school hard knocks. How did I end up there? How did I get there? I'll go with that. I'll go with that. How did I get there? All right. First, when I got woken up and basically was not given a choice. You're coming with us. You're coming with us. Period. You, doesn't matter what you say, doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter how much you whine, cry, complain, you're coming with us. I did not like that. I tried to get away because I felt like I was being kidnapped, like for real. And I, for all intents and purposes, kind of was. But I was in my own house, you know? So anyways, I get put in the back of a Suburban to go to St. George, Utah. Okay, it was the very first place that I went, and that was called Brightway, was the name of that place. So I'm going to name some of these places because most of them don't exist anymore. We can get into some of that later, but most of them don't exist anymore. But that was the name of the place, Brightway, in St. George, Utah. And I went there to receive my passport, or to wait for my passport, to basically, it was still an extension of the same company, but like the preliminary portion of it. So I spent 2 weeks in Brightway, and that was interesting. It was like an indoor, like, I don't know, it was kind of almost hospital-esque in a way, to a certain extent. And it was basically to wait until you got all your prerequisites to go out of the country. And so that was the first 2 weeks. There were some events there, but whatever. And then I think it was myself and one other person that went from Brightway to Samoa. And so, no, was it? I can't remember for sure if it was another person or if it was by myself. I do kind of feel like it was. Yes, it definitely was one other person. It definitely was. And so we then get on a bus from Brightway in St. George, Utah, and we go down to Las Vegas. We drive to Vegas to get on a plane. Now, they gave us very specific clothing to wear. We couldn't wear anything else. It's just kind of, it's almost like a prison transfer or a prisoner transfer. We had to wear white shirts and blue shorts, and they gave us like flip-flops or like little kind of like really light gauge, like house shoes with maybe like a thin rubber sole on it, almost like socks with a rubber thing on it. Anyways, that was so that once we got on the plane, we could get, identified and recognized in LA. And then once we got off the plane in LA, people were there to receive us, and we waited for then the plane to fly to Honolulu. And then we flew to Honolulu. And once we got off the plane in Honolulu, there was another group of people waiting to receive us. And that group of people waiting to receive us had another kid that was on their way to go to Samoa as well. So this is an interesting part of the story because that kid was extremely escorted to Honolulu airport. And what I mean by extremely escorted, he had these boots on that the people that were bringing him there put on him so he couldn't escape. And these boots looked like big ski boots, like Frankenstein big ski boots, kind of. And actually, they had little metal things sticking out of the side of them, like Frankenstein bolts sticking out of the side of these boots. And those boots, come to find out, would deliver a shock to him if he tried to run away. So not only were they heavy so he couldn't run away, but if he did run away and they couldn't catch him for some reason, they could shock him with a button and they'd get him. So this is the kid that we met in Honolulu. To get then on the plane to go to American Samoa was our first destination in the country of Samoa. And American Samoa, this will be a cool story. Well, I don't know if cool would be the right word, but interesting to say the least. When we got off the plane in American Samoa, which is a little bit of a bigger airport than Western Samoa. Cat, shush. So, anyways, American Samoa is a little bit bigger of an airport than Western Samoa. Not quite a big, huge international airport, but it's a pretty decent airport. And when we get off the airport when we get off the plane in Samoa, American Samoa, there's this guy, and I'll mention his name because he was pretty cool actually, and I will refer to him actually as just the Samoan genie. Okay, that's what he referred to himself as. So he was the Samoan genie. And if you're just joining, Samoa is in the South Pacific. This is an island. So here is, well, maybe I won't mention his name because I know his son and I don't want to make him feel any kind of way, but we'll just call him the Samoan genie. And he's waiting for us off the plane, and Samoans are giant and his belly is big, and he's sitting there with his arms like this on his belly, and he's wearing like a sleeveless shirt, a lava, which is basically like a wraparound, like I don't know, probably something familiar to the Western world would be more like a beach wrap, like a woman's beach wrap, like a material kind of wraparound. And that's what their traditional garb is, even for men. They wrap that around their waist, and that's their pants. So he's sitting there, sleeveless shirt, hands on his belly, lava, no shoes, or maybe if he had shoes, they were really worn out sandals. And his first words go, "You boys for the program?" And he did not look official to me. That was not an official looking person to receive us, to take us to somewhere where we don't know where we're going. Here's like, what is this kind of thing, So, but there was nobody else. So we're like, yeah, obviously, Oh, by the way, the one kid that it just dawned on me. The one kid that I went to from LA, from Las Vegas to LA with, and then from LA to Honolulu with, tried to run away in Honolulu. He was able to kind of get away, but then the people that received us were able to find him. So, little side note: not the kid that had the Frankenstein boots, the other kid that came with me, and we didn't have Frankenstein boots. So, back to the Samoan genie. We didn't know what else to do. I mean, here's somebody that says he knows what we're supposed to do. So, okay, let's go with him. So we did, and we had to go through immigration. Okay, pass our passports. I don't even know if I should say this, but in immigration, there were bribes. I don't remember if it was immigration or customs that was an envelope and a bottle of wine, or if it was the other that was an envelope and maybe it was just an envelope. But I know there was a bottle of wine in an envelope in one, and then something else at the other, and we were just okay, stamped right through, So that I remember thinking that's kind of suspicious. Why would this dude be handing the immigrations and customs people, for all intents and purposes, bribes? Like that happened. So now we're out of the airport. Oh, that was what was really crazy about it too, because everything that went through customs was not our stuff. It was all other stuff, like in cardboard boxes. I had no idea what it was. I could not say for sure, but it was not our stuff. We were told that our stuff was going to be on a different plane and all this and all that. But when we went through customs, there were a lot of cardboard boxes that were bribed through customs. And we were basically bribed through customs, So, so anyways, now we're through customs, and the Samoan genie proceeds to put all these boxes in his station wagon. And he's basically the whole back of the station wagon is full, and it's us three kids in the back seat. And there might have been a box or two in the back seat, and one of us was in the front seat. That specific detail I don't recall exactly, but it was full of boxes. And we were then told that we had to make a couple of stops along the way to this guy's house in American Samoa, which just so happened to be like an hour and a half maybe away from the airport of American Samoa. And I remember thinking that was pretty suspicious too, like, why are we going so far away? Where are we going to end up in the jungle of American Samoa? Or, like, what's going on here? But eventually, before I get there, along the way, we made stops, and each one of those stops unloaded a box or two, went to the next stop, gave a box to and so I don't know if we had boxes left over that night, and we did some, he dropped off some other stuff like back to the airport the following morning, but there was definitely delivery of those boxes through customs to places in Samoa. And I guess, to be fair, whether or not the bribe was because of the boxes, I couldn't say for sure. So they could have just been like, I know how that is when you're in the islands. You have people like send you supplies because they're expensive on the island. So that could be the case. Absolutely 100% could be the case. But in either case, we get to this guy's house, and it's like cinder block built construction, real rudimentary. The windows were not proper windows. They were like the glass pane, that kind of like have long strips of glass, almost like blinds, but they're glass, and you can open and close them. And it's basically empty, with the exception of a couple of little pieces of wicker furniture, like a wicker little love seat and like a little couch. And that's pretty much all that's in the living room, with, I think, like a little tiny TV on a milk crate, in front of the couch. Now, bear in mind, I am 15 years old. I'm barely just turned 15 years old. And this is the place I find myself in. And so The reason I'm calling him the Samoan genie is because once we got to his house, we had kind of sort of talked a little bit. We didn't know what was going on, but once we get back to his house, he kind of showed us what was going on. There was one other room that had an inflatable mattress in it that one of us was supposed to sleep on. The other one was supposed to sleep on the couch. The other person was supposed to sleep on the floor. This is supposed to be a professional facility, right? And this is how we got there. So that's why I remembered it so good, I think. But anyway, he says, I am a genie in Samoa. That's how they say it, by the way. Samoa. It's not Samoa. It's Samoa. But anyways, he folds his arms on his belly again. He says, I am the Samoan genie, and I will, before you go to program, I will grant you one wish before you go to that place as a gift. And he was dead serious. He was dead serious. And so, but there was three of us, so we all kind of had to conversate and like think of what we wanted before we went to this place. We knew about basically what we were in for, sort of, because we came from Brightway previously, so we kind of knew what we were in for. And it went back and forth. I remember I used to smoke pot when I was 15, and so I was thinking, man, let's get some pot and get stoned before we go to this place, at least just one last time, And but one of the kids, he wasn't it. He didn't want that, and so that would have been unfair. So that was thrown out the window. The other guy did. The guy with the Frankenstein boots, like, hell yes, let's get stoned. But anyways, we all decided on a pack of cigarettes. For what reason? That's what we all three could agree on, was a pack of cigarettes. And he provided us a pack of cigarettes and a couple of books of matches. And we proceeded to sit there and smoke a few cigarettes on our last night of freedom, as far as we were taught, And so again, here's a guy, that I shouldn't glorify that, but like he at least like had kind of like an understanding, like you're about to be in for something. He knew what that place was like. We didn't. We had no idea what we were in for, honest. So that was that night. Before I get away from his house, the Samoan genie's house, again, the windows were really the old style. There was another bedroom that we weren't allowed into. I think that was his bedroom. And the other room was a blow-up mattress that didn't hold air very good. And that's where I slept, was on that blow-up mattress. Of course, I woke up in the morning on the floor. But I'm going to tell you what I experienced between going to sleep after smoking a bunch of cigarettes. Probably, I don't know, way more than I would ever, but anyways, I went in there, laid down on the mattress. I blew it up. And between that time and waking up, I had probably a dozen cockroaches the size of like maybe not my hand, but my palm, scurry across my face or my foot, wake me up, and yeah, everything's bigger in Samoa. If you think everything's bigger in Texas, go to Samoa. Serious. Everything is bigger. Everything. The people, the vegetation, the insects, everything. Anyways, so that happened that first night at the Samoan genie's place. If I had the fourth right, I said, yeah, I wish not to be woke up by cockroach rats, But anyway, so the next morning we get up, and I'm pretty sure we did drop off a few remnant boxes along the way back to the airport. And then we got on a really small puddle jumper plane, like extremely small puddle jumper plane. I think there was maybe 8 people in that plane. It was an 8-seater, and we had to go from American Samoa to Western Samoa. And that was the scariest plane ride I'd ever had in my entire life. So if you can imagine the last 48 hours of my life in September of 1997 at 15 years old, we go from St. George, getting thrown in a place in St. George, Utah, to flying Con Air to from Vegas to LA, from LA to Honolulu, from Honolulu to American Samoa, go through all that I just went through, and now I'm on a puddle jumper plane falling out of the sky, literally falling out of the sky. Every single time we'd hit turbulence, we would drop thousands of feet. And I've experienced turbulence before, but I'd never free fallen for seconds. I mean, that feels like a long time when that's happening. And again, the Samoan genie flew with us. So he flew with us to Western Samoa in that ridiculously crazy plane ride. So we get to the airport of American Samoa. And when I tell you that I have never seen an airport like this, I can almost guarantee neither have most of you. If you've been to some third world countries, if you've flown into some third world airports, maybe you have. But literally, the airport pretty much consisted of a very small shack for the most part. This is at the time, it might be better now, but it was a really small building. I mean, it was more like a shed than even a house. And this is supposed to be the airport. And I'll never forget, there was a cow, a very skinny cow, that was tied up to a little tiny stick in the ground in like the front yard of the airport. So here's this cow with like a string or a rope tied around its neck, tied to this little stick in the ground in the airport. So give you an idea of the third worldness of Western Samoa in 1997. Okay. And in the late 1900s. So we get to Western Samoa, and we had to go to a couple of places. I think there was an office for the facility in Apia, which is the capital of Western Samoa, spelled APIA. Apia is the way it's pronounced. And so that was where the airport was, and that's where we flew into. And again, I'm pretty sure we had to stop at that office to do something. That's where they stored our passports. So even if we tried to run away, we'd have to know where that office was to get our passports and try to get off that island. This is how that was. Like, we were not getting away from this situation, is the point that I'm trying to make. Once upon a time, we did have plans. Like, we had coordinated beach plans to like riot and try to get out of there. And I'd love to have seen what that would have actually looked like if it ever took place, because here would have been a bunch of, teenage palangi. That's what they call white boys in Samoan, is palangi. I would have loved to have seen how that actually would have took place if all of us tried to actually like riot and get out of there and hold our own against all these Samoans. I mean, it was probably 10-1 in our favor, but still, that would have been an interesting sight to see. But where was I going with that? So anyways, that's why they kept the passports at the office, was so that even if we did get away, there was nothing we could do. But part of my plan, I wasn't going to riot. This is how I'm sharing with you exactly what went through my brain. I'm not jumping in the middle of a riot and fighting Samoans and getting in some chaos. I'm not doing that. But while that chaos is if it ever happens, I'm hitting the hill and I'm making my way to some marina or something, and I'm gonna try to get a sailboat and I'll sail out of here. I don't necessarily wish I could have seen how that come to fruition, because that may have ended up with me deceased on a ghost ship in the middle of the Pacific for who knows how long. So I'm kind of glad that never happened. But that was what I was gonna do. I'm gonna change this. Hold 1 second. Anyway, so that's worse. Anyways, um, so then that was my plan, was to run away while everybody else rioted and fought the Samoans, you know. So we dropped the passports off at the office, and then we had to drive all the way to the other side of the island, and then drive all the way to the other side of the island. If that makes sense, all along one coast to drive all the way across it to the other side is basically what I meant by that. And that was a actually kind of a cool drive. I remember even thinking about that at the time, because at the time I grew up in the Bahamas. I didn't live in the Bahamas when I went to Samoa. I lived in Utah when I went to Samoa, but my life in the beginning was from birth basically till I think I was like 11 or 12 years old when we moved away from the Bahamas, and then we moved to Utah. So I'd been around the ocean my whole life, or my whole early life up to that point. And this ocean in Samoa was very different, though. The island was different. The vegetation was different. The whole feel was different. It's a volcanic island versus a sandstone island in the Bahamas. So Bahamas is sandstone. Samoa is volcanic. And they're pretty old, from what I understand. I mean, there's some serious jungle on that island, and I remember thinking how large the ferns were on some of those trees. I mean, these ferns were the size of like the little bus thing that we were on to take us to the beach, and huge, massive. And I remember thinking, looking over some of the valleys, it was so green and so lush and so huge trees. It reminded me of Jurassic Park. In fact, I think the first Jurassic Park had come out relatively before this took place, and it reminded me of that movie Jurassic Park, because of the vegetation and the feel of the island. I literally almost expected a big like brontosaurus to bring his head up out of the jungle and roar or something like that. So I remember thinking it was pretty cool experience from the what I'm able to see so far, and that was getting to the beach. And then we get to the beach. Uh-oh. And I don't know. I couldn't tell you what I expected. I honestly couldn't tell you what I expected. Um, I I can tell you what I recall observing and kind of like what is going on here. And I remember I didn't have my stuff. Again, everything that came through the airport with us was these boxes for the Samoan genie to drop off to other people, and I had no idea where my stuff was. And I was told it'd be here in a couple of weeks. And even in '97, like if you're told, oh yeah, you'll have stuff in a couple of weeks, like that's a long time not to have nothing, like that's a long time. But I was to have nothing for a couple of weeks. So yeah, that was fun. And I got to the beach then. So uh I don't know if I should stop this here and continue later or continue now. I mean, I could continue rambling. I'm sure the last little bit was a little bit more cohesive and a little more entertaining than it was at the very beginning. But maybe I just had to get that out of the way. Let's see if there's any. Let's see. Oh, okay. I don't know who's still with us, but yeah. I, it was a fun. Oh, Grace is entangled, so keep going. Okay, we'll go. We got 5 people. Let's do it. Why not? I might have to take a break to maybe cool off. We got some storms here today. I'm in the shop. It's really not too bad, but after sitting here for a minute, I might need to go cool off for just a second, and not interrupt the live stream. But I'll keep going. I don't mind. If Grace wants to hear more, that's fine with me. It's kind of fun. I get to tell the story to the world, and that's kind of why I did want to do this too, because Okay, there was a few movies. Oh, what does it say? What's your thoughts on gold price and prediction in 10 years? Well, gold, this isn't all about gold, but I think gold will be way high in the next 10 years. So buy it or mine it and try to hold on to as much as you can. But what was I saying before that? So there's been a few movies. There was one with what was her name? So Selena Gomez, I think. This was the actress's name. She was in a movie called Boot Camp was the name of it. Boot Camp. And that was not about the place where I went, but it was about a place that was very close and very similar. And there were some similarities to what that movie was about and to what kind of we went through and kind of the place that we were. There were definitely Mila Kunis. That's what it is, Mila Kunis. So all right, John, I'll go. This is my beginnings, brother. So, anyways, there's a movie Boot Camp with Mila Kunis that's extremely interesting. So, if you want to watch a movie that's pretty close, watch that movie. There's some documentaries also. There was a Paris Hilton documentary because, from what I understand, Paris Hilton went to the same company's facility, but the facility that she went to, I believe, was in either Montana, Utah, or Idaho. One of those three states. I don't remember exactly which one, so I can't quote that. But she apparently went to one of those, the same company that was, that Samoa was under. Paris Hilton went to one of those too. Okay, Grace. Yeah, I was pretty sure it was in Utah. So there's been a documentary about that, and there's a lot of controversy about these places. And I do not want to take away from anybody's traumatic experiences that they had in those places. I would never want to do that to anybody. I don't want to take away from what they experienced. What I will say, however, about what I experienced is Samoa was not supposed to be comfortable. It was supposed to be somewhere where kids that were running with the wrong people, that were dismissive of society. Now, if I forget, somebody try to say, now talk about something with the society, and I'll remember what I was talking about. But it to me, it was like kids that did not get along with like teachers. I did not get along with teachers. There was a lot of teachers that I did get along with, but to me they were really cool. They would, they weren't not, they didn't present themselves as an authority figure and you have to and blah, 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 and wouldn't listen to any kind of other concept other than what they were saying. I had a problem with that at a very young age. And however, the teachers that I could actually like communicate with was like, I think that's stupid. And they would say, well, why do you think that's stupid, Nick? And actually like engage in that conversation. Those were always my favorite teachers because then they gained understanding of where I was coming from and could what's the word I'm looking for? Could accommodate to that instead of just, nope, Nick, you got to sit here and do this way. And if you don't, then go to the principal's office. Those are the assholes, like honestly, because they didn't take the time to see. But I digress because there was much more than just telling a teacher to whatever. But who knows exactly where my life may have ended up if my life hadn't been interrupted, disrupted, influenced, whatever you want to put in that position, by Samoa. So again, I have no idea. I cannot tell you exactly where my life would be if it had not been for an interruption. I can, either way, I can speculate that, I would have pulled my head out of my butt and figured some stuff out eventually, which I'm sure I would. I don't think I'm an idiot, but who knows what could have or would have happened in the meantime, you know? And I wasn't, I want to make it straight. I wasn't like, I wasn't like bad. I was just rebellious. And actually, I'll go into that society thing I asked to get reminded about. I think, to be 100% honest with you, the cosmic reason for this particular place was to a certain degree, to me, in my eyes, was to teach some people going into my generation some of the things that were going to be very lacking in that generation and the generations to come. If that makes sense. That's really deep. I've internalized a lot of this sometimes, but honestly, like one of the first things that I formulated as far as, well, why would this place exist? Like, why would they have it this way? What is the point of this? And past just, making some money from the people that were there or whatever, but to me, I maybe had to assign a bigger reason for it, maybe is why, but the outcome for sure was almost anybody and everybody that did come out of that place at least continued to be a critical and a critical and what's the word I'm looking for? But a critical thinker, like, that will ask a question like, hey, well, you say that I have to turn the screw this way. Why can't I turn it the other way? I mean, that's obviously something simple for us mechanical mind people, but think about somebody who's never heard that. You have to turn it to the right. Well, why? And if the response is just because you have to, then that person never learns. And this is a little bit off of a tangent, but I think it fits the same glove or the same shoe, if you will. As opposed to saying, well, because if you turn it to the left, the screw will loosen. And if you turn it to the right, the screw will tighten. And I think too often, I know I'm guilty of it myself, of just turn it to the right. That's because that's what I said. That's what you have to do, instead of taking the time to explain it. And maybe where I'm going with this, with maybe it was something like to literally almost like we can't lose this critical thinking. We can't lose this like reality thought process of how we can observe what we are doing and contributing to our environment, and what we can do to make the best of that, or contribute to the outcomes that we wish to see, as opposed to letting things happen to us and just, oh, okay, well, I tried to turn it to the left, but it didn't tighten, so I just gave up, or whatever. All kinds of different examples I can think of, but I in a way think that part of the reason for that place, almost like I said, that's why I use the word cosmic. Maybe that's the reason, that the cosmic reason, or why I think the cosmic reason was that, because, or even the spiritual reason. You could take that any way you want, really. I've taken it all sorts of ways in my last 30 years since this all ended, but, maybe that is part of it. But everybody that came out of there maintained their critical. Well, I can't say everybody. Let me rephrase that. A good percentage of some people that came out of there did maintain or continue with that very, what's the word I'd be almost looking for? Like constructive thought process. Like, why is this way? Why is that way? Instead of just accepting it how it is. So basically, what we were taught to do is to not accept how it is for ourselves. Meaning, if my girlfriend is, or my girl, I say that because earlier, my wife at the time, if my wife is mad at me for something, regardless of the situation, I obviously, if she's mad at me, I did something to contribute to that. Something. So is it her fault because she's mad at me? Or can I maybe take some accountability and figure out maybe what I did to make her mad at me, to cause that reaction? Now, if I can do that and I can do that constructively and honestly, I'll figure out exactly what I did. Therefore, I can change it the next time so I don't cause hurt to the woman that I love. You see where I'm going with that? So it's important. There's a lot of important things in there. The feedback from somebody that you love, an honest and open mind and reflective mind of your own, and you know the willingness to put forth the effort for something that you value as an individual person. And I think that sums up a lot of lessons in the big picture right there. Um, you know, you are the creator of your own destiny to that extent. So why wouldn't you want to pay attention to those things so that you can create, the destiny or the result that you most desire? Um, so, anyways, let's get back to Samoa because that was just a side lesson. The Samoa stuff's probably way more interesting. Or maybe I'll take a break, or say goodbye. I don't know which one. What should I do? One second. All right, I'm back. So you probably can tell by now there was a lot of lessons that I learned from that experience and many others really. Uh, so that's part of why I wanted to share this story, and obviously it's pretty entertaining and a little dramatic at times and whatnot, but um, so I guess I can pick up where I left off on the beach, getting to the beach. when we first got to the beach, it dropped us off up top, the upstairs that I talked about. But it was just open ground. You know, there was a water tank on the top of the cliff, and then there were 3 beaches. And if you're standing on the cliff and looking out toward the ocean, the open South Pacific Ocean, the beach furthest to the right was called Sinalele. The beach in the middle of the 3 beaches was called Fanga, and the beach to the left then was Fangatele. And I think Fanga in Samoa means gun, and Fangatele means machine gun. And if I remember correctly, as the story goes, there was a few things that took place on these beaches. And a couple of them may be one of the reasons that there was some kind of weird stuff sometimes that took place on those beaches, like kind of strange stuff that that could potentially have a plausible explanation for, but also might have like like a weird explanation. So, but anyways, Funga and Fangatelli, gun and machine gun. And apparently these beaches were strongholds during some World War II for whatever army that occupied that island during that time. There was another rumor, I guess you might call it, that the beaches, or at least one of those beaches, was used after I can't remember if it was like a cholera outbreak or some sort of a disease outbreak that took place on the island, and they actually disposed of all the bodies on one of those beaches. And I don't know the truth to that. I have no idea, but that is what we were basically told. And there was a one time where they had to dig up, or they were putting in a new septic for a new, like, they were building a bigger bathroom because there was more kids down there. There was like 100 kids on each beach, and 100 plus kids on each beach. And so they were digging out that septic, and I remember, like, all of a sudden they were just like wouldn't let anybody go to the bathroom. Like, it was like, no, you got to go to the bathroom somewhere else. They wouldn't let anybody over in that area, nothing. And what I eventually got told was that they had found a skull or skulls or bones or something. So there was something going on over there. So that may lend some credence to the fact that there was, it was a mass, like, burial on one of those beaches. Who knows? But so yeah, there's the beach. You got open ocean to your front, and when you're down on the beach, the only way to get out of there was up the cliffside on a real small trail that went up to the top, and that got you to the top. So that's Samoa. There's a lot more, obviously, but I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I don't want to lose people too bad, but I'll be publishing this obviously as a video, I think. Maybe not. Maybe if you didn't catch it live, too bad. I don't know, we'll see. But my wife actually made a very profound point to me just a second ago, and I was taking a little break. But I was just like, I don't know why the beginning of this was so hard for me. I didn't expect it to be that hard at all. Like, at all did I expect it to be that hard. But she made a very profound point to me that when something good can come out of something, sometimes the forces that be that are not about good try to stop it somehow. I would not say that isn't anything far from the truth, if I do say so myself. So, that might be why it was a little bit tough in the beginning to get going, So, and if I'm honest, that my whole life, part of that I've associated you know, not the forces of not good, you know, with keeping a brother down, man. You know, like even when I tried to do good, or you know, or whatever, you know, it just always seemed like I'd come up and take a breath in life, you know, and then there'd be some just nasty force that just comes along and back underwater. You know what I'm saying? And I'd have some good, you know, some good weeks or months or whatever, and you know, most of my struggles in my adult life honestly have all revolved around resources. I have been impoverished most of my life, and I've had some pretty good employment sometimes too, but then something will happen, like the business will just close down one day, and I go show up to work and it's like empty. It's like, what the heck, man? I was making good money here, and now it just closed down for no reason. Nobody told us nothing. So things like that would happen. That always would suck. Or you know, early in my mining career, I remember I had a job in Montana that was supposed to be associated with you know, building an operation if the sample program proved worthy. And so I went up, ran a sample program, proved it worthy, gave them all the report of what we could do to actually start making money. And then it was like, oh no, well, we want to do this now. And so that is, I mean, it's not my project. I had nothing to say about it, but under the premise of building an operation, it just got set aside. So, and there's a lot of other things too. You know, you get a decent, like you know, if I'm a consultant for a project or something like that, I mean, the end of those days or the end of those jobs always come, you know, and sometimes they're in least opportune times, and sometimes you see them coming. But most of my problems have been financial, if I'm honest. I mean, there's been other things that just really suck. You know, my oldest daughter, you know, with how I envisioned my life and children, you know, that was a very, very, very trying time of my life, um, trying to be a part of my kin's life, and that had uh, a it took a toll for sure, for sure. So, anyways, uh, I don't know where I was going. I'm rambling, but I think I'm gonna cut it short. Maybe not. We got 5 people here. I'll keep going. Why not? Um, so, man, brain fart. Uh, Somebody asked a question. Oh, we'll get into the movies since, yeah, Paris Hilton, the movies, the documentaries. We'll get back to that stuff. Uh, or some of it. Watch those, and a lot of those people, um, I know, obviously were pretty affected by their experiences. You know, they wouldn't make a documentary for like, oh yeah, it was great, and we've sung Kumbaya, we're all great. That wouldn't have made, you know, that's not very dramatic. And again, I don't want to take away from anybody's experience that was traumatic for them. It was traumatic for me. I know I was out of all those facilities, out of Samoa, Czech Republic, Jamaica, Montana, Idaho, Utah, whatever. Out of all those places, unequivocally, Samoa was absolutely the toughest, 100%. Um, if you go and you see any of the videos from all the other places, if you go to YouTube, if you're on YouTube, go search for um, Tranquility Bay in Jamaica, Paradise Cove in Western Samoa, um, Casa del or no, what was it called? Casa by the Sea in Ensenada, Mexico. I don't remember what the one was in Montana, but yeah, you can go see that. You can go look at that and see what those facilities and those places look like. and then go look at, like I said, go look at the Paradise Cove one, and go look at the 48 hours investigative report that they did there. In fact, the back of my head is on that the thing. It's just all blurred out because we not they didn't have permission to put any of our faces on TV except for the people that were part of the 48 hours. So yeah, well, I think I will end it there. We've been on here almost 2 hours. That's a pretty decent marathon. Maybe I'll post this as a podcast or something like that. I don't know, but hopefully it was interesting, and hopefully it was entertaining for everybody. Real quick before I go, if anybody wants to type something in and ask me a question, feel free. Let me go through some of these questions here. Oh, pardon me. I'm just scrolling through these comments so I can maybe cover everything that somebody might have asked. Okay, John, you asked if how many other people were there. I might have answered that earlier, whether you're here or not. There was at least at least 100 plus kids on each beach. So times three, there was at least 300 when I was there. But throughout the whole life of the facility, I think it started in like the early 90s, potentially, and closed down, I think, in 2000 is when it officially closed down. But then the owners of that facility, I think, just started another one elsewhere. And so that was a common thing with this Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs, is they would get shut down somewhere for whatever reason, and then they would open up another facility in a different location under a different name and things like that. So I know that went on, and I think it actually still may go on now, because let's face it, there are. I mean, I'm not an advocate for it. Like I said, man, like it's a tough one. It really is, because you know I wouldn't want to put somebody in that position, but then at the same time, like if what would you do as a parent in some of those positions? I mean, some of the kids that were in Samoa were a lot worse than me. I'll tell you that much. And yeah, so I could just only imagine. I can't imagine. I can't fathom what somebody might do. In that situation. But anyways, I'm rambling. Let me go. Oh, there was from early 90s to 2000. So I'm pretty sure there was like in grand total, there was thousands and thousands of kids that did go down there. And that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but probably at least 1 to 2,000, total. And yeah, most of them were American kids. There was one kid there from Samoa, but his family was in the military. He was an American kid, but there were some kids from other parts of the world. Let's see. Yeah, I was getting emotional, Jennifer 007. Like I was saying, I didn't think it was going to be that tough to start this conversation or start this story, but it was a little bit more tough than I thought. Siamese. What's your thoughts on gold price? I said that it should go up. What was that? AZ slide. This is a wild and crazy story. Keep going. All right. Well, we're gonna sign off. Thank you for joining me. Like I said, I might just publish this as a podcast. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Thank you for joining. All right, John. Thanks for hanging in there, brother.